Groundnuts can be eaten or sold for a good price. Groundnuts are rich in nutrients, minerals, energy and vitamins. However, poorly managed groundnuts can contain a poison called aflatoxin that's dangerous for people to eat. Now we know that these aflatoxins are harmful for us and for the animals, and they mainly damage the liver and the kidneys. To have healthy groundnuts, it's important to care for the groundnut during its whole growth, but especially during drying and storage. In this video, we'll learn how to dry and store groundnuts to keep them healthy and easy to sell. Well, the pods that are good are unbroken with a pretty colour, but the diseased pods have brown spots, kind of grey spots. You open the groundnut shell and it even has a green colour. You can bite it, split the groundnut in your teeth. It has an unpleasant smell, nasty and bitter too. That's how you can recognise it. Certain moulds grow on groundnut, maize and other foods. These moulds produce a poison called aflatoxin. Aflatoxins are caused by moulds in the soil. The moulds multiply more when it's humid and hot. When there are lots of weeds in your field, the groundnut plants stay humid longer. The weeding protects the plant a lot. When a plant is weeded, it grows well. But if it is weedy, then it gets moisture and gets more disease. The groundnut shell protects the nuts, but when harvested too early, the pods shrink. And when harvested too late, the pods split and moulds can enter. Once groundnut is harvested, the mould spreads from diseased pods to healthy ones by physical contact and wind. There may be a blackish-green mould on the surface of the groundnut, maize and other food crops. But when we magnify the mouldy surface, we see that the mould is made up of a forest of tiny stalks. Each stalk carries chains of spores. These spores easily break off and infest healthy pods and grains. The wind can carry the spores a long way. If the spores land on groundnuts that have not been well dried or are being stored under humid conditions, the spores can germinate on the pod, grow into the groundnut and spread inside the grain. But this is not visible to the eye, and the nut looks clean to start with. But inside the nut, the mould is spreading, and aflatoxin is produced. Aflatoxin in reality is colourless, but it's shown here in yellow. At this stage, the nut and others which have been infected may still not look mouldy from the outside. The mould will only be visible on the surface of the nut, after the mould has grown inside the nut for some time, and has broken through the nut's surface to produce millions of tiny new spores. This is the mould. The moulds that live in the soil get into the groundnuts when they are dried on the ground. Now we know why groundnuts get diseases when the pods are damaged and when they're dried directly on the soil. Also, if the harvested groundnuts get wet, the mould can grow. In the valleys of Bolivia, it can rain at harvest time. So Antonio Medina is drying his groundnuts on a tarpaulin on the porch of his house. To make sure the diseased pods do not infest the healthy ones, Antonio and his family separate the good pods from the small, broken and diseased pods. The empty or immature pods get mouldy easily, so only select the big, healthy pods. Never eat the bad groundnuts and do not give them to your animals.
Bueno, yo lo diría a los demás agricultores, amigos míos.
I would tell the other farmers, my friends, you should not give groundnuts with aflatoxin to animals, to chickens or to pigs, because they will also get sick. And through their meat that we can eat, we can also damage our health. We bury all of those damaged groundnuts, and we only eat the healthy ones.
Y solamente consumimos lo que está sanito.
Stir the groundnuts several times a day. They will dry faster and less mould will develop. There are some simple ways to find out if the pods are dry, as Antonio tells us. We pick up a groundnut that is drying on the tarpaulin and we shake it. It rattles. And then we know that it is dry. Or we can open the pod and see that the skin of the nut is red.
Y cuando falta todavía, esa camisita no se rompe tan fácil.
The ideal way to keep your groundnuts off the ground and to protect them from the rain and moisture at night is to put them in a solar dryer. You can make a raised platform for wooden poles and sticks. The one shown here is about 1 meter high, 12 meters long and 2 meters wide. Spread a mesh on the sticks so that produce will not fall through. Tie the mesh to the sticks. Place poles every 3 meters at the sides and middle of the platform to hold up the plastic sheet. The poles at the side are 1.5 meters high. The ones in the middle, 2 meters. Wire connects the poles along the length of the platform. To protect the plastic sheet from tearing, wrap some cloth around the end of each pole. Now carefully stretch a long sheet of plastic over the poles to cover the entire platform. At both ends of the platform, the plastic is left open, so the wind can blow over the produce. Don Santiago dries all his groundnuts in the dryer. But maize and chilies can also produce aflatoxins when dried directly on the soil. So now he also dries those in his dryer. Produce dried in the dryer is healthier, cleaner and less is wasted than when dried on the ground. If it rains, produce dried on the ground is ruined and can't be sold.
Tiempos antes que teníamos la secadora, se cachivamos en el suelo y el suelo mucho polvadera se
A
pasmaba
while
toda
ago,
y
before we
el
had the
secador
dryer,
hacía
we
muy
would dry
bueno.
on the ground, which had
Uno
lots of
metía
dust.
en
Everything
humedad,
got diseased there.
bonito
But in the
color
dryer, the
seca.
produce is very good.
Bien ha resultado el
It
secador.
doesn't get wet. It dries nicely.
Buenísimo. Ahí
It
limpio
dries
se
in its
mantiene.
own colour.
Limpio. Y luego
The
seca.
dryer
Dos,
has
3 días
turned
ya
out
seca.
well.
En el suelo
The
secaba
groundnuts
una
dry
semana.
quickly in 2 or 3 days. On the
Ahora está
ground, they
limpio,
dry in a week.
bien limpio.
It's really clean in the dryer.
Lindo el resultado del secador.
Store the healthy groundnuts in woven bags in a cool, dry place. Store the groundnuts on wooden platforms or on pallets so that they do not touch the floor. Do not let the bags touch the walls either, as they will get moist. Control mice and rats. They are dirty, they damage the bags and expose the pods to moisture, so more moulds will develop.
Bueno, yo quisiera decirles a los compañeros de que es conveniente
I
almacenar
want to
en
tell
una
my
parte
companions to
amplia
store in a
que sea
big place where
airoso,
the
que
air
entre el
comes
aire,
in, and always store the
poner
produce
el
high up.
producto siempre
It
en
shouldn't
altura,
touch the
que
floor
no esté
because the
pegado al
floor
piso,
gets wet.
porque el piso,
So it
si
should be
es
high
como esto,
and airy.
comienza a transpirar y
Air should get
perece.
in so it
Entonces,
dries.
en alturita es conveniente y que sea airoso, entre el aire va secando nomás.
Watch it constantly
Almacenar
because
bien,
rats
controlar
also
también
get into the
continuamente,
produce.
porque la rata también entra a los productos.
Tiene que estar el cuarto
The
bien
doors to the
seguro,
room
las
have to be
puertas,
tightly closed, and raise a
criar un
cat
gato para que se
to
lo
eat
coma
the
el gato.
mice. So to have clean, healthy groundnuts free of aflatoxins, remember what we have learned. When groundnuts, maize and other crops are not managed properly, they can develop poisons. The poison is produced by certain moulds. The moulds live in the soil and can enter pods easily when they're damaged. Separate the good pods from the broken, small and mouldy ones. Dry the groundnut on tarpaulin or on plastic sheets, but never on the ground. Stir the groundnuts several times a day. Do not ever let the groundnuts get wet. Store the groundnuts in a cool, dry place. They shouldn't touch the floor or the walls. If you follow these suggestions, you'll have healthy groundnuts, more food for your family, and money for your expenses.
¿Por qué es importante? Porque le vendemos cuando es el maní bonito.
Why is it
de
important?
color,
Because when the groundnut is a pretty colour, we sell it for a good price.
y las que están
When the
de
groundnuts are
así,
not such a nice
menos
colour,
color,
the
así,
buyers almost don't want them. They make a bad face,
casi no
and there's
quieren,
not much sale.
de mala cara decimos, ¿no? Así,
And
no
when the
quieren
groundnut
las-
is properly
no
ripe
hay mucha
and nicely
venta.
dried, it has a
Cuando
yellow
está el
colour.
maní a tiempo,
Yes,
tiene su
and
color
that one is sold right
amarillito
away.
y bonito secado, sí, ya se vende. ¿Cuánto lo valora?